Well, let's talk about the situation and the offer that was made by the UK yesterday to residents of Hong Kong. We can speak to Benedict Rogers, who's a human rights activist who used to live in Hong Kong but was barred in 2017 and went on to establish the NGO Hong Kong Watch, which monitors human rights, freedoms and the rule of law. Benedict Rogers, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. It was a considerable offer to a large number of people yesterday from the UK Prime Minister. What more do you feel the international community could and should be doing here?
Well, I really welcome the British government's announcement, but I think there is more that's needed. First of all, I think that the international community should be doing everything possible to make Hong Kongers leaving Hong Kong a last resort. So in other words, we need pressure on Beijing to think again. We need targeted sanctions. We need attention from the United Nations, perhaps a UN envoy, which I and others have been calling for, but also a coordinated lifeboat rescue plan so that those who aren't British national overseas passport holders and who are in grave danger have a place to escape to as well, should they need to.
Yes, is there particularly a lot of young activists? Are you really concerned about them at the moment?
Very, very concerned. Nobody born after 1997 is a BNO passport holder, and yet so many young frontline political activists are the ones who will be in perhaps most danger now under this new law. So I've been calling for Britain to lead the way, but recognizing that Britain can't do it on its own. So to coordinate with like-minded countries, the United States, Canada, Australia, Taiwan, which has already been very generous in its response, and some European countries too.
I spoke to one young man who was a spokesman for a pro-democracy group a little bit earlier, and he was talking about certain measures like targeted sanctions. It's an issue that some politicians have raised. Is there a whole swathe of political and economic moves that the UK government could take, or again is it about working in concert with other countries?
Well, I think it is important to work in concert with other countries for maximum effect, but certainly the UK should be leading that, and the UK should be preparing to apply Magnitsky-style targeted sanctions, perhaps also sanctions on certain entities closely associated with the Chinese Communist Party. We're not talking about blanket sanctions on China as a country, the Chinese people. These sanctions should be targeted on those directly responsible for serious human rights violations.
Isn't the difficulty here for the government the wider political situation? China is a global superpower. It is a trading partner. We've talked so much about Huawei and its involvement in this country. Isn't that would the government say that is the balancing act it's trying to deal with there?
That is a balancing act, certainly, and that's why it's important for like-minded countries around the world to act together, because they're much stronger together than countries acting alone. But I think we do need to recalibrate our relationship with China, not only because of what's happened in Hong Kong, the mass atrocities against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and indeed the repression of the truth rather than the virus that led to, or at least contributed to, the COVID-19 pandemic. So for all these reasons, we should be reshaping how we relate to the Chinese regime, and that involves rethinking our economic relationship and deploying political and diplomatic measures.
And actually, should we have seen this coming, the national security law? Were there things that China was doing, actions that were taken in recent times that have led us to this place?
Very much so. One of my regrets about where we are now is that I've been trying to highlight the warning signs for the past probably 6 years, where we've seen all sorts of examples of the erosion of Hong Kong's freedoms, the disqualification of pro-democracy legislators and candidates, the arrest of peaceful protesters, the abduction of booksellers from Hong Kong, even in a far less significant way, my own denial of entry, and then the refusal of other foreigners like the head of Human Rights Watch, the expulsion of the Financial Times Asia editor last year. So all these things have been building up, and I think if the international community, and Britain particularly, had acted sooner, we may not be where we are today.